Okay, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing HUD housing, and we're going to be discussing mental disabilities and developmental disabilities. Okay, I'm going to take you on an incredible ride through HUD's policies, HUD's rules, federal law, state law, city law, ADA laws, and I'm going to keep them all very brief, and then I'm going to show you some case law. And then if they still don't want to comply and give you grief about that, then we'll go into civil rights complaints, state complaints, licensing complaints, and basically show you how to end their career before they even leave the building. Well, not quite that fast, but I assure you, if you implemented all these things within a week, they would reconsider their position on whether or not they would be intelligent enough to dictate or interpret that law applying to you and whether or not you get housing. Let's go over some basic facts. A medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, any of those people there, any notations, notes, including a diagnosis, and filling out a simple form would be sufficient for you to get the housing. Another thing I want to tell you is, they only require a very basic form for you to have your doctor fill out. This is not like going out and getting a social security check, okay, where you go to court, you got to bring doctors in and all that. This is much different. This is just for housing. So in other words, they just need a verification of these files, okay, that can be reviewed. There are certain types of mental illness and all that pretty much on a list that you can't see that are automatic qualifiers. And I can tell you depression number 2, bipolar, schizophrenia, Asperger's, autism, and many, many, many other ones. If you don't know and you're not sure, shoot me a message, okay? Because it would take me too long to go through that. So let's talk about the HUD definition. And remember, this is the HUD definition. That don't mean shit. That's not law. No senator wrote the HUD definition. So we're going to discuss the actual federal law, but I want you to see what their definition is. A physical, mental, emotional impairment, including impairment caused by alcohol or drug abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, brain injury that is expected to be long-lasting or continuing. And then as a whole group of all those things I just said, of indefinite duration, substantially impedes the individual's ability to live independently. Substantially impedes the ability to live independently. Well, who determines that? Them? The person making $10 an hour behind the desk? Is that the person determining it? No, I don't think so. And based on that simple criteria, they don't have the legal or educational background to make that determination. So if they don't have a doctor in the building, if they don't have an attorney in the building, then they absolutely don't have the right to turn you down. And I'll show you exactly why, and then we'll get into that case law I was telling you about. Okay, so let's go into a few other provisions, okay? So documentation obviously would be great because then you're just going to shorten your route to all of this. So obviously if it's visual, they can see it, great, but it's a very simple form that doctors, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and other people can fill out. Also medical records that you can withdraw yourself, so you can actually collect your own records. Now, I'm going to move down to development disability as defined. So the Development Disability Assistance and Bill of Rights Acts 2000, okay, means a severe chronic disability that is attributed to mental or physical. So a developmental disability can be mental or physical impairment or a combination and is manifested before the age of 22. So you would need to have some type of documentation showing that it is a disability that arrived before age 22. Look, let me tell you something. That before age 22 that's not applicable, okay? If you can prove you're having the problems right now, then that's what it is, okay? So don't worry about the age 22. And so anyways, and it goes on to say a lot of different things here. The individual may be considered to have a developmental disability without meeting 3 or more of the criteria. So they give you this long list of jargon about all these different criteria you got to meet. No, I don't think so. Okay, so let's move on. United States of America, so this is going to be case law. United States of America Department of HUD and Housing Development gets sued by, guess who? Kathy Lundy. What happened with Kathy Lundy when she won that? And who did she sue? She sued in the United States court, and she sued HUD. And we'll look at line number 7 and see what the determination was. She had a complaint that she had disabilities. She had degenerative disc disease and bipolar. She won her case. Those are automatic entries in documentation. It is irrefutable, indisputable. You simply slap this down on the table, and if you have bipolar or degenerative disc disease and any kind of record of that, there will be no further assertion that you cannot be considered disabled, okay? That is the end of it. Unless they think they can supersede, a superior court, okay, or a federal judgment. trust me, they don't pay them enough nickel and penny rolls to be able to supersede these other judgments through federal court. Okay, let's move on. I want to read you a little bit from ADA law. Okay, some old laws. I'm very familiar with them because if you had watched some of my previous videos, you would have known that I told you that my dad was a paraplegic. We often, and he worked for the State Department, and we often had battles to get people just to install a sidewalk he could roll up. Let me tell you something, man. 60s, 70s, and 80s, people didn't give a damn if you couldn't get into a store. Okay? They'd rather just see you crawl along. There weren't even ramps. There were no handicap parking, any of that stuff. Okay? Well, there might have been, but there wasn't that much of it, and people simply didn't care. All right, so the Act retains, and I want to look and just go into specific parts. So the Act retains the ADA basic definition of disability as an impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Well, who gets to determine what's a major life activity? They'll define it for you right here. A record of such impairment or being regarded as, which means that somebody's bearing witness, there is a record bearing witness that you had this ongoing problem, though there may not be a strict definition of saying, okay, I know he was crazy, but I didn't write bipolar. Okay, so that's kind of where you're arriving with that. Okay, and then it goes on to say, however, it changes the way that this statutory term should be interpreted in several ways. Most significantly, the Act, and then it goes into what it talks about. Substantially limits, quote unquote, expands the definition of major life activities, and then here's the bone crushers right here. If the first list indicates activities that the EEOC has recognized, e.g. as walking, as well as activities that the EEOC has not specifically recognized, e.g. reading, bending, and communicating, meaning talking. The second list includes major bodily functions. Okay, let's talk about that. Immune system. Do you have AIDS? Normal cell growth. Do you have... okay, well, that one fails my mind right now, but we'll move on to the next. Digestive problems, bowel problems, bladder problems, neurological problems, brain problems, respiratory problems, circulatory problems. Remember grandma and her circulation problems? We can talk about bladder problems. People that can't keep their bladder, they may have to use incontinence materials, diapers, whatever. And it goes on to reproduction functions. However, let me tell you something. Just because you can't have kids doesn't mean you have a disability. Nice try. It's not going to work, okay? So it covers a wide range. So who can authorize this? A doctor. Simple as that. Any of these things. In other words, you're going in there with your documentation, a proof, a history, and all of that, and you're going in there. And then here's the magic part to some of this. I want to go over to past the case law. And one more thing, just bear with me, folks. Bear with me. So once you go in there, a lot of people are under the assertion or impression that you have to go on the normal waiting list. No, you don't. Not always. Okay, let me tell you what. People that have particular types of disabilities, especially things like autism and developmental disabilities like that, you don't really go on that list. In fact, they're supposed to keep the HUD housing open to year round. In fact, they're supposed to keep a reserve of housing that they don't really tell anybody about, specifically for people that have developmental disabilities. Okay, there is a reserve, which means you can walk in 365 days a year and be able to apply stress-free for it, and that it cannot be a burden to you. So they can't take all year making a determination of whether or not they're going to do it. Okay? So essentially, it is a separate list and a very short one. The only exception to that particular rule would be is if you need specific types of accommodation. Let me suggest this. If you're in a wheelchair, you need a very large shower where you can roll in a metal wheelchair in order where you can take a shower while sitting, okay? If you require light sockets on the wall to be, 12 inches higher, yes. People that are disabled and in wheelchairs, like my father, when he built his new home, he built all his sockets higher, all the counters were higher, so he could get his wheelchair under there. So if you need those type of accommodations, including ramps and all that, that would slightly limit it and maybe take a little bit longer, but they have completely separate housing for that, and the expectation is it needs to be deliverable to you guys any time of the year, okay? Not just whenever they open up the list and when they don't open it, okay? That open and closing the list is for people that don't have extraordinary circumstances. So, what is extraordinary to these people? What does federal definition define a lot of that is? And you'll have to bear with me again because I have to go to another note. Oh, where's it at? Well, folks, it doesn't look like I was very prepared on that one. If you got to give me one more second here to find a note. Okay, so the last part of this I want to read before we get into the secondary part, and we're almost closing this out. Depressive orders, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic disorder, brain injuries, obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, and then it goes on to notation in federal law. This does not mean that these conditions are not disabilities, okay? So they're saying that it does not mean they're not disabilities. So it simply means that in virtually all cases, these conditions will be covered as disabilities. This language is written in their own manuals. So how would you be able to describe all these functions on here, depression disorder, bipolar disorder, and that long list, and it's literally in their own manual, okay? And then they go on to define their own rule as saying this does not mean that the conditions are not disability. It simply means that in virtually, and notice the word virtually, meaning 99.9% of the time, in all these cases, these conditions will be covered as disabilities. That is a clear notation to the low-end worker sitting up there with her dusty computer that she will not and cannot deny you with just even a small shred of evidence that you have a mental or developmental problem, okay? Now, if you've got a real hard ass you're dealing with, we'll move on to the last part of this deal. This is where you slide another piece of paper across the table, and then you really send that person to the point where they want to just fall off their chair or get on the phone with an attorney. I just tell them, look, when I walk out of here, my first call will be to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Service. I'll be filing a complaint there. If you are licensed, I will be filing, and this would include whatever state, and for the intended purpose of this video, I'm going to say the Texas State Board of Examiners for Professional Counselors, and I'll be filing a complaint there. When I get through there, I'll be filing a complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and then I will also be phoning that in. And then I will call the Civil Liberties Union, okay? And then I will consider this an act of discrimination personally against me, and I will retain counsel with legal aid, which is in every state, and I will retain counsel with legal aid to assist me with this. So if it is your assertion that I need to walk out of your office and that I am not going to get housing and that you're saying that you are the final verdict, that your personal interpretation, which doesn't mean shit, is going to prevent me from getting housing, I will see you in a week, and then we can review the legal forms. Thank you, folks. So, there's your own list. There's a private list specifically designed for you guys. You can go in and arm yourself with all the paperwork in the world. I'm a pretty smart guy. I go in there and let me tell you something. You're gonna cooperate. You're gonna comply. That's simple as that. Knowing what I know. So if you need these documents or other things, that's fine. In most cases, these people will bend at your will if you have even a small legitimate case. Just remember to bring your driver's license, Social Security, document your problems. If you have somebody it can show that they're actually visually having the problem, that works. And in most cases, 99.9% of the time, the paperwork is sufficient, and then you'll move on to the second stage. Now, let me be clear about one last thing. Look, just because you're depressed, okay, and you got documentation of that doesn't mean you're going to get on a private list, okay? Not like people with a developmental disability, okay, or people that are actually schizophrenic, okay? So you may end up on either or list unless you have a lot of special considerations. When I say special consideration, I mean that you're acting in such a manner that it would be disruptive to the people at whatever said property that you would be renting, okay? So in that case, they would want to put you in a very specific type of housing, okay? But if you do have your faculties together, you are being treated for these particular problems, then you should be okay, okay, with the minor low-end disabilities. Now, everything else going up the list, you can go anytime you want to in HUD, okay? And you can apply then and there. And if they don't understand the rules, then you need to pull them out and show it to them. You don't need to tell them that you have the manual. You just simply need to pull out their own definition of this stuff, maybe a little bit of case law and federal law. I've never had anybody tell me they had to battle that far, but I wanted to prepare you guys for everything, and that is my friend, the end of the video. I want to thank you guys for joining me. And like I said, if you don't understand, you need the documentation, or you're having problems, the best thing to do is you can email me with the email at the bottom of the comment or in the description, and I'll do my best to help you. But I really don't think it's going to get that sophisticated, okay? Hey, guys, have a great weekend. Bye.